Howdy folks, doing a starter replacement on a 2010 Honda Pilot. Haven't found a video for this generation, so figured I'd put one up and see how it goes. Alright, I'm gonna get started by removing the stuff that we gotta take out. I'm gonna take out this air intake, gonna take out the battery and the battery tray. I got started with watching videos on older models and the Honda service bulletin, or the technical manual, which talks about removing these things. So I'm going to get started and check back in. Okay, first things first, holding in this manifold are these plastic clips, and just so that you can see how to do it, it's kind of a two-part process. You've got to pop up the center with a screwdriver. Oops, sounds like I just broke this one. And then the whole thing comes up, and yeah, you could see I kind of broke off one of those little ears there. Hopefully that's not too big of a problem. So I'm just going to go through and do all those. Well, you gotta love it when I say I'm going to do all of those, and it's just these two right here. So now I'm going to just take the whole manifold off, or the air, I don't know what this thing's called, but there you go, just pull that off, and you can see it just gives me a lot more room to work with down there. So I'm going to, of course, take out the battery, but I'm also going to take this opportunity to look at the battery. I bought this car a bunch of years ago, and I haven't replaced the battery, so I'll see if I can find a date on there and see how it's doing. Well, looking at the battery, there's been a little bit of leakage. There's not a whole lot of corrosion. I'm going to take off the negative terminal, then I'm going to take off the positive, then I'm going to take off this bracket so that I can get the battery out of there. Then I'm going to have to take off the battery tray that's down there. But when I take the battery out, I'll do a further inspection and hopefully clean it up and go from there. I don't know about you guys, but for me, the hardest part of working on a car when you got to pull the battery is dealing with these little things that hold the bracket down. So, you've always got to, you can't really don't have a lot of light down there, but there's this little post that's got a bolt on it, and you've got to get it loose enough so that you can push this down and pull out this little metal piece right here that holds it in. So it just takes time, and it's frustrating because this thing will kind of wiggle, and you can't get a socket on there because it sticks up too high. I guess if you had like a high clearance socket you could. So anyway, you just got to take your time with it and get it off there eventually. I was able to get it off. I don't know if you can kind of see, but it hooks into the little tray and then holds this down to clamp the battery in place. I want to take a minute to mention this handy little thing. If you don't have one of these, when you're working on a car, it's super handy. It's got giant magnets on the bottom there, and you can see it just holds any metal part in place. So I use it for tools, but then when you start taking out bolts and screws and stuff, you just stick it in there and it's going to stay in place, and then you'll know where it is when you need to put it back in there. Alright, I'm going to pull the battery out and see what I'm working with down there. I got the battery out, and looking on the side here, it's 12/16. It's now January 2019, so this battery's a little over 2 years old, so I'd say it's still good to go. It's kind of dirty on top, but not really corroded or anything, and the previous owner did a nice thing, put these little washer things on here and put some good grease on there, so I'm just going to kind of clean it up, but not really functionally clean it up, just so it looks a little nicer, and I don't know, because why not? Well, I got a little cleaner. You can see it's not that big of a deal, but at least this way you can kind of, well, if it was in focus, well, you could read the label and, at least know what brand it is. I don't know, who cares? Anyway, back in here, there's this plastic tub that the battery sits in. I'll clean that out a little bit too. I'm just going to set it on the side, and now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. The starter itself is located down in there, so it's kind of below the battery tray. So I'm going to work on taking this thing out. It looks like there's a bolt right there, and yeah, we'll see what else we got. Okay, so yeah, this is like a whole thing. So it looks like this is like the fuse box, and it looks like it's bolted into the whole tray, which is also bolted to this air intake. So I'm just gonna start taking stuff apart and see what I can do to get this out of here. it's possible that I'm gonna not be able to get this out of here, and I'm gonna have to come up from below to do the starter, but I believe that underneath the car, oh geez, yeah man, that's gonna be, no, that's a whole lot of no down there. Alright, so hopefully I'll be able to get this out of here and get in there. Yay. I got this bolt out here. It's this guy right here. And then looking down here, this guy's got a couple of rubber gaskets that go around this plastic piece. So I'm going to pull that out and see if that gets me any looser over here. Okay, well, I got that bolt loose, but it's basically, that's all that's attaching this to the battery tray. And then this has two little ears that you've got to pull out to slide this off, and then we now have the battery tray free of the other stuff. It looks like it's bolted to the frame with two bolts down there and down here. I'm going to start on those and see where I got to go. It might also be that guy is part of what bolts this to the frame, but I'm hoping not. So I'm going to, there's also bolts down in there, which probably bolt this side to the bottom. I'm not sure if I'll have to take this off to get that out. We'll see. Well, I screwed up and some cursing has ensued, but I've edited that out. So I dropped one of the bolts down there, and then that wasn't enough, so I dropped the socket, popped it off in there. So what I did was go inside and get some magnets, some of those nice little rare earth magnets, and I just taped them to this screwdriver so that I could reach down in there and grab it. I know I could buy one of those like Extendo magnetic bars, and hopefully I will, but I'm real cheap. I got this side piece free, but it turns out there's like a little bracket, plastic bracket that holds this wiring conduit thing to this. I'm gonna have to pop that off to free this piece. Hey, and there are actually two harness things snap on here, and I don't really know how to get them off, so I'm gonna now just focus on taking the bottom out, because I think I can leave this in place and then I can just take that out and then access the starter that way. We'll see. Right. Holy cow, that was challenging. Alright, so that bolt, easy. Even that bolt, not so hard. This guy, super hard, because the wiring harness kind of covered it up. So there's 4 bolts to get this. I'm now working on this one. I gotta say, my little magnetic buddy here is really coming in handy, because getting into there is super hard, so I would definitely not try this job without one of these tools. Well, so those were definitely the 4 bolts. The tray is loose. The issue is that it's being held to this wiring harness, or realistically this wiring harness is held to this to hold it in place by this kind of plastic zip tie. And I can't, it kind of goes through to the bottom or the inside of this, and so I think I'm just going to cut it off and see how it goes. Well, yeah, cutting that zip tie definitely got this free. I would say it's probably, I mean, if this is a have to do for the job, I would just cut it first, because it'll make it a lot easier to get to that bolt that's holding this thing down. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is... Okay, still held on. So that's this side of the battery tray. There's the starter. I can finally actually see it right here. Looks like I'm going to be okay with not having that there, and I'm just going to dive into the starter now. One more thing, I'm also very lucky because there's that bolt I dropped, and it's sitting right where I need it. Something that I think is kind of handy when I'm replacing a part is to kind of, look at, it all kind of blends in after, this car's 9 years old, so after 9 years of dirt and road and wear and everything, the part that you're replacing kind of blends into the background. So I like to kind of take the replacement part so I can look, especially looking for like electrical connections. So, when I'm going down here, I can sort of see, oh, well, there's where this wire comes into here. What does that look like on my actual replacement part, and that way I'm probably less likely to break something. Alright, here we are, finally getting down to the meat and potatoes of the starter. So, there is the starter right there. Oh, this is horrible lighting. I don't know. Let's see if I can do anything to improve it. No, not really. Anyway, the starter kind of hangs out down there. I've found I'm going to have this 14mm socket on 2 extensions. My other extension is just too long. But I got to kind of thread it around, well, maybe it's the thermostat, I'm not sure. And then to get it down into, oh, this is horrible, you can't really see it, but there's the top bolt right there. I'm also, before I could do that, going to see what getting to the bottom bolt is like, and just see what kind of combination of things I'm going to need to make sure I have what I need. Okay, well, top bolt is out. Man, that is hard to get to. You really got to thread through this thing with those 2 extensions. I had to use a breaker bar, so I put this old bike tube on here to hold the wrench in place, and then use that section of old fencing pipe. Once it broke free, it was super easy to get out, but getting it to break was hard. Now I got to dive into the bottom bolt, which is incredibly hard to get to. I don't know. There's like no way to even get light down there. It doesn't really matter because you can't actually see it, but there's this wire thing. That's the transmission fluid dipstick, which I took out, and the bolt is back here, but getting that clearance is super hard, so haven't quite figured it out, but was too frustrated to keep trying. So now that I got the top bolt out, there's no going back, so here we go. Well, that was crazy interesting. So basically, in order to get to that bottom bolt, you gotta kind of thread through and around this stuff. Let me hit that light. Gives us at least a little something. There's like, man, I don't even know if you'll be able to see it at all. No, not really. But basically, right to the left of the transmission fluid dipstick, there's a thing you gotta kind of go in. I went in with the 14mm and then a socket and then this thing, but you gotta thread the socket wrench on so it's facing up, because you're gonna need to get that breaker bar on. Alright, the starter is out. And now this is something that I was a little worried about, but I don't know. So this is a shim that was in there. I don't know if, I've read a little bit about shimming starters or not shimming starters, and the guy at the parts store said, I bought it at Pep Boys, by the way, said you don't need to shim them anymore, even only on Chevys, and you don't really need to on Chevys, so I'm going to do what I usually do when I run into an automotive problem. So that's where my phone ran out of recording space, so it stopped recording. What I was going to say is that's where I should call my father-in-law, because he would tell me what to do. And he advised as what the service manual suggests, which is to replace the gasket. It says replace, theoretically I guess I could go to Honda and buy a new one, but I just put the old one back in there because it was in fine shape. Also, I wanted to point out that on the removal, it does say to remove this radiator hose bracket. I ended up just popping the radiator hose out and moving it over, but it does call to remove it, and that would make it a little easier to get down into the starter. Also, on the installation, it does have the foot-pounds needed, or the foot-pounds for a torque wrench when you're tightening these bolts. I had to borrow a torque wrench from my father-in-law because I don't have one, and he did say that's definitely important because there's an aluminum head on the engine and you don't want to strip those bolts out or you'd be in for a world of hurt. Now I'll show you the tools that were necessary for the job. Okay, well, here are all the tools that were required for the job. Some lighting there. That light actually kind of sucks, but it worked. Headlamp is definitely needed for this job. There's that magnet tray I pointed out, and there's my handy little magnet on a stick helper tool. This is the zip tie that was in the actual car, and I replaced it with just a regular standard zip tie that was approximately the same length. I needed these cutters to get in and cut that zip tie because it's a super strong one. This is where things get interesting. So you need a 10 millimeter socket. You also need, this is my handy third hand here, you also need a 14 millimeter socket. This is my socket set that I've had for like 20 years, and it's actually really good. I think I bought it at Walmart or Target, but it doesn't have a 14, so luckily in the ye old tool chest I had an extra 14. And then I definitely needed these two 3-inch extensions, and this super long extension was really handy. If you're buying tools, I would highly recommend, it's nice to have, this is like a straight one that locks the socket on straight, and then this is one that has a built-in wobble, which I really felt was necessary for this job because you kind of can come in at an angle but still get it to sit, get the socket to sit onto the bolt. And that's about it. Some gloves that I ended up taking off, and yeah, so good luck, enjoy.